I tapped my card. It beeped. I was about to grab my bag. Then someone screamed, "Thief!" and everything stopped. Dwayne Thompson, 36, a well-dressed black man with a calm presence, stopped by the local supermarket after work to grab a few snacks for his son. He was tired, but smiling. In his cart, coffee, an energy drink, and Jaden's favorite sour candies. The store felt cold under harsh, fluorescent lights. A short line formed at the checkout. Dwayne messaged his son, "Be home in 5. He placed his items on the counter, took out his card. Beep. The cashier nodded. He reached for his bag. Then came the shout. "He doesn't even have a card." I saw him stuffing items into his pockets. It was an older white woman behind him. The room froze. Dozens of eyes turned toward Dwayne. "What?" Dwayne muttered, stunned. "I paid," but the woman kept shouting. "I've seen him here before. He's a thief. Call the police." The cashier panicked and stepped back. Customers shuffled away. Dwayne pulled out his wallet, holding up the card. "I paid. Contactless." The cashier saw, but no one listened. The cashier quietly pressed the security button. And just like that, Dwayne was no longer a shopper. He was a suspect. Before security even arrived, Dwayne looked around. The room had gone silent. The cashier stared at the floor. The customers kept their distance. Only the woman's voice echoed. "Now the truth is coming out." And Dwayne whispered, "Truth? You'll see." Security guards arrived within minutes. No one asked Dwayne what happened. No one questioned the cashier. No one checked the system. "Sir, step outside. Empty your pockets." "I paid," Dwayne said, holding out his card. But the guards didn't listen. They grabbed him by the arms, pulling him away from the counter. His jacket flew open. His bag hit the floor. Candy, coffee, chips, scattered everywhere. A customer raised their phone and began recording. But no one stepped in. No one said, "Wait, maybe this is a mistake." Outside, Dwayne was shoved to the ground, his shirt torn, his pride crushed. "I paid," his voice cracked. Not from anger, but humiliation. The old woman followed them out, pointing straight at him as she spoke to police. "I saw him, I'm sure. He was stealing." A white officer turned to Dwayne. "Sir, I need to see your ID. Please remain calm." Dwayne handed it over, hands trembling. He looked up at the sky, exhaled. What should have been a 5-minute grocery run had become a public takedown. Back inside, the cashier stared at the terminal screen, eyes widening. There it was. Payment received. Time, 6:43 p.m. Total, $26.45 Visa, ending in 1183. Dwayne sat on the curb, struggling to hold back tears. Through the market window, the woman still watched him, a slight smirk on her face. But inside, something was changing. The cashier blinked at the screen, and then again. System, payment approved. One of the officers was jotting down notes while Dwayne remained seated on the curb. He hadn't resisted, hadn't shouted, hadn't run. He simply stared at the ground and kept repeating, "I paid." That's when the cashier burst out of the store, breathless, clutching a receipt in her hand. Her face looked both shocked and furious. "Wait!" she called out, running up to the officers. "This customer paid. I checked the register. His card was charged. Here's the receipt." The officer paused and took the slip from her hand. The timestamp, amount, and payment method were all there, undeniable. The cashier pressed on. "I checked the cameras too." He picked up the items, came straight to the counter. "Everything's logged in the system." The older woman who had shouted before now took a step back. Her earlier confidence evaporated into an uncomfortable silence. The officers turned toward her, their expressions shifting. She looked away. From the crowd, a young bystander murmured, "I recorded everything. It's all on video." When the store manager finally arrived, it was clear he realized the situation had spiraled. Dwayne was still sitting there, his jacket torn, bag ripped open, belongings scattered, but he stood tall, unwavering. He turned to the officers. "So now what, officer? I followed every rule. I paid for my items, and yet I was dragged, accused, and humiliated. Who's going to apologize?" The officers didn't answer. The manager didn't speak. And the woman? She had already slipped quietly back inside the store. Dwayne rose to his feet and held the receipt tightly in his hand. His gaze locked onto one thing, the security camera above the door. This time, the footage won't be buried. This time, the truth will speak louder than fear. By the next morning, video clips of the incident had flooded social media. Dwayne being shoved to the ground, his bag spilling, the woman's false accusations, the cashier handing over the receipt. Every moment was visible and undeniable. The hashtag #Justice for Dwayne trended within hours. Thousands spoke up. This isn't just about a store. This is a snapshot of America. What item could be worth more than a man's dignity? What if he didn't have the receipt? News outlets picked up the story. but the supermarket chain remained silent, and that silence only fueled more outrage. Journalists appeared at Dwayne's door, but he didn't speak. Instead, he let someone else take the lead. Camille Ross. Young, fierce, sharp, a civil rights attorney who knew how the system operated and how to dismantle it. When she saw Dwayne's story, she said only one thing: "This isn't a mistake, it's a symptom." At a press conference, Camille addressed the media. "My client shopped, paid, and walked to the exit. But because of the color of his skin, the world around him pressed pause and called the police. This wasn't about stolen items. This was about stolen dignity. And we don't settle for silence. We settle in court." The store's eventual apology came late and empty. "Our security procedures will be reviewed. We apologize to the customer." Camille's response: "Apologies can wash away a smudge, but this wasn't a smudge. This was a fracture, and we don't patch over fractures. We rebuild." In front of a judge, Dwayne stepped in front of the cameras. In his hand, still, was the receipt. "This isn't just a piece of paper. This is my dignity, printed in ink. This time, I won't step back. This case will be the future I tell my son about." The courtroom was packed. Dwayne sat in the front row, wearing a clean suit, hands clasped tightly in his lap. Camille Ross sat beside him, calm and collected. Behind them, his son Jaden sat quietly next to his mother, eyes fixed on his father's back. Across the aisle sat three figures: the supermarket's head of security, the elderly woman who had screamed and accused Dwayne, and the corporate attorneys representing the store chain. Camille rose to speak. A stillness swept through the courtroom. Her voice rang out, sharp, composed, unwavering. "Your Honor, this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the reflex of a society conditioned to fear blackness. My client paid for his items, yet he was dragged, shamed, and humiliated, and only a receipt, a cashier, and security footage stood between him and a criminal charge." The defense attorney interrupted. "There were procedural errors, yes, but no one acted with malice." Camille removed her glasses and locked eyes with the jury. "Then answer me this: if my client were white that day, would he have been forced to empty his pockets, thrown to the ground? Would his son's favorite chips have landed in the gutter?" The courtroom screen lit up with surveillance footage. Dwayne entering the checkout line, tapping his card, payment confirmed. The elderly woman pointing and yelling, security grabbing him without question, snacks spilling across the floor. The cashier running out with the receipt in hand. No one made a sound. The elderly woman never confessed to lying, but her eyes never lifted from the floor. The judge reviewed the documents in front of him, paused, and finally spoke. "The defendant has been cleared of all wrongdoing. The supermarket chain is ordered to issue a public apology, pay damages, and hold the responsible security staff accountable." A light ripple of applause swelled into a wave. Camille smiled. Dwayne closed his eyes and took a deep breath. And from the back of the courtroom, a soft voice broke the silence. "Dad." Jaden stood up. Dwayne turned and opened his arms. His son ran to him, clinging to his neck in a tight embrace. That day, the receipt may have just been a slip of paper, but what it represented was a lifetime's worth of dignity. Outside the courthouse, Dwayne stood before a sea of reporters, Camille by his side, Jaden holding his hand. He took the microphone, looked into the lens, and spoke. "I came here to buy groceries, but the color of my skin was weighed heavier than the items in my cart. Today, I got to speak my truth in court. But what about those without a receipt? I'll keep speaking for them too." Final words appear. "The ones who can prove their truth may walk free, but those who can't are still being punished. The receipt for racism has not yet been voided.